Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb Bue and Mark Gilbert.
Well, hello, Mark. Hi, everybody.
Hello, Barb.
So, what if your mind is more than just a collection of thoughts? This is a thing that keeps Mark and I awake at night, by the way. And what if it's a gateway to a whole new way of living? I want to welcome you to Conversations in Mind. I'm Reverend Barbara, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow minister, Reverend Mark Gilbert. And we are here to attempt to demystify the study of new thought, dive deep into the science and soul of consciousness, and kind of keep it real. So whether you're a longtime seeker or curious about the power of your own perspective, we're going to dive into the mind. And today, Mark is jumping today because this is one of his favorite topics that we've picked for today. It is the question of what does new thought have to say about the meaning and purpose of life. And before I let him go, though, I want to say thank you to Danielle, who made a contribution to New Thought Media Network on our behalf. So really appreciate that, Danielle. And Mark, I know you're ready. Meaning and purpose of life.
Nothing.
This is the show that's going to answer everyone's questions about their whole life, right?
Yes, the big question. The big
one.
and I'm chomping to say two things. I'm chomping to say that although you and I have come to explore and understand to a degree what the meaning of life is relative to new thought and science of mind philosophy, that listeners and people watching this podcast, they've got to make up their mind for themselves. I mean, that goes almost without saying.
We're going to give you all the answers, but they're not your answers.
Right. We are not here holding ourselves out as the holders of the vast truth of the universe that you must listen to and accept with 100% certainty. However,
please no, I do not love those pedestals. No.
But if what we say resonates with you, hopefully you can fold it into and evaluate it versus your own learning and experiences and what you think about life. And we hope that this has been beneficial. The second thing I want to say at the outset is when we talk about purpose and meaning, you can generally look at that in two ways, and I know that I have personally. One is to say, why does this world exist? Why does the universe exist? Why is there anything at all? I mean, there could be a total non-existence, but we have an existence. And so when we look at the purpose and meaning, sometimes there's this big macrocosm of the entire scope of everything and say, why does anything at all exist? The second thing that we often look at it is, why do I exist? Why do I, as this individual on planet Earth with the name Mark, who had all this pattern of experiences, why do I exist? So as we launch into this question, I think they are intertwined in my belief, and I bet they are in yours. But there is sort of a one dovetails into the other. And I think when we talk about the meaning of life, oftentimes we're talking about it from the big scheme of everything or the smaller scale of our own individual lives and why I exist. So that's what I wanted to jump up and down and say at the very beginning, Barb.
So what? Oh, so why does anything exist? Well,
why does anything exist?
I have two sort of flip answers.
Okay.
One is that we were a colony that was seeded by another race form out in the universe someplace to provide entertainment.
Okay, but why did they? How did they come to exist? Flippant answer.
Well, then there's that rabbit hole. And the second would be, so that the universe spirit, so that divine mind can experience itself. That's what I think. And so the divine mind, divine expression can experience itself through these multitudes and multitudes and multitudes of expression.
Yes.
We really are, I think, like in this vast playground, right?
Yeah. We exist for the bliss of the divine, And what do we mean by that? Because that's a phrase that I know that Aurobindo, the famous Indian teacher, used to say that in his writings, that we exist for the bliss of the divine. There's others who made that statement as well. I know in his later years, New Science of Mind founder Ernest Holmes, who I've read and listened to a lot of his audios, I know in his later years of life, he liked to quote that quote from Aurobindo, that we existed for the bliss of the divine. And when we think about that, because we immediately like, well, what do you mean the bliss? Because there's all this crap going on, and it's not very blissful from my perspective. And what we want to see or recognize is that if there is truly God's Spirit, the all, the infinite, the mind with a capital M, that the one thing that it needs to do, needs in a very relative term, is to break itself apart into parts of itself and break its experience into moments of time, so that it creates this playground of existence that we live and move through, so that it, the great grand it, God, Spirit, can experience itself as Barb, Mark, and our listeners and everything else on this planet, the books behind me, dogs, air, everything is an experience for the divine, for the bliss of the divine. And it's a way for God or itself to know itself. So that's, in my mind also, I'm just expanding on what you said, Barb, but the ultimate big reason in my mind is for the all to know itself at a more fulsome level.
So really, we're just specks of the all. And I'm kind of glad you said that, which is a whole other topic too. But because I think when we think about this, it's really easy to start to think about this idea that God is some being out there that's pulling all these strings or notching, doing all this stuff. And it's not. So it's, I mean, this is the rabbit hole of rabbit holes, right? Like, what is it? And if we're it, then we're part of it. Then we're, the source and the same substance as if, and the moon and the stars and all those things. I'm talking in a circle right now because I can't quite get the right thought out. Because if we are an expression of, then that lends itself to this greater truth that we are all of that substance. And that means all, not people who believe in New Thought, not Christians, not Muslims, not Hindus, all. And to address, in playground, and if this is a vast playground, right? On playgrounds, if you remember, we skinned our knees. And sometimes we fell off of the monkey bars, that's all part of the learning and expressing. So not to make light of hardship in any way, shape, or form, because the world is an interesting place right now and people are really stressed out. But ultimately, I mean, I guess we could say if it's not okay, it's not done.
Mm-hmm.
And it is okay, however it is, even if it needs to change. And it does. But even if our expression needs to change and learn and grow, we are still part of this perfection of divine mind. And man, that sounded like a big circle.
Well, when we talk about it being the playground, another way people like to often reference it is as a classroom, that we're here to learn and grow through it. And I think we've touched on that in prior episodes, the fact that, we come here to learn, evolve, grow, and that means through free will, we can make mistakes and screw up and learn lessons and hopefully learn lessons and change our actions and move in a more positive and growth-oriented direction where we recognize the unity of all and we seek to do good in the greatest level we can for all, recognizing the interconnectedness of ourselves to everything else. So this is a playground, but it's also a classroom, and it plays out not only in our individual lives, but collective lives. I think we talked in some prior episodes about the fact that, when we're growing through some of the challenges on the planet right now, that we're experiencing not only as an individual level of myself, but we're also seeing it play out in the planet with people moving through a collective experience where we're growing and hopefully evolving through, the individual pockets of consciousness that exist on this planet, that they each are having their own aha moments and moving to a higher vision for what they'd like. So we play that out in our individual lives, and we're playing it out in the collective lives of the we as well.
Yes. So the purpose of our life then, what's the purpose of our life then? I mean, I feel like in many ways the purpose is to find that connection, to begin a deeper exploration of that connection and that idea of oneness and togetherness. I think that we make it a lot of work sometimes, and it's like we're supposed to find our purpose, find our purpose, find our purpose. And I think over here, like there is a find the thing that moves you to express in the world. So really, it's about uncovering our expression, not finding our purpose. I mean, we can get the work out of it, right? And think of it as a revelation of who we're here to be, how we're here to express. And mostly that's about love and connection and kindness and those sorts of things. But on the way, then, we're not supposed to just spend our life sitting on our couch going, "Oh, I'm expressing," right? Like,
Yeah.
So how do we find our own meaning and purpose then?
Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
that.
One of the things that is helpful for me and is stepping back and looking at the big picture again and putting myself in the place that God, Spirit, the all, whatever we want to, give a name to it, the absolute took aspects of itself and embedded itself into this vast creation of the world in which we live and move and have our being, that we all are aspects and have within us spirit or God and characteristics of God. And so what God, in that process, which in New Thought is called involution, God involving itself into its creation and us evolving back to recognizing that we are one and come from spirit, that evolutionary arc of the story of our lives, that it helps to recognize that in the creation of Mark, that within me, and not only this physical form, but the consciousness or the mind that moves through me is embedded with certain God-like qualities that include an impetus to grow and to push myself on in life. It starts maybe the lowest levels of just surviving, of making sure that I get through, the day-to-day activities, and I can feed and eat and do all the things that I, need to do for a human experience, but that I'm also pushing myself to grow and evolve. And there's also, and that's, I think, an embedded characteristic so that when we see the urge to live and to thrive, that's a divine characteristic that's within us. But also coupled with that is a special, unique ability, talent. Ernest Holmes called it a divine urge, that urge was something that was in us, calling us to express our own uniqueness. So, and if we get back to the fact that we exist for the bliss of the divine would not want every aspect of it, if it's going to go to the trouble of creating the illusion of dividing itself up into individual aspects of itself so they could experience their uniqueness in a diversity, that he would not, I don't mean he, it.
It's so easy, right?
I know. She, it would embed itself and give itself the impetus to want to express itself in the infinite variety of ways. So that the unique talent that maybe I have is different from the unique talent that you have or our listeners have. And that we've been given a unique ability or calling to do something in this life that, again, is unique for the bliss of the divine, the bliss of the one.
So based on that, your understanding of all of it is that we're here for entertainment.
Yes, we're content for the streaming service of God, if you want to put it.
I see, like that's interesting, because I find myself resisting that and going, it's got to be a little bigger than that, because I actually believe that there's an expansion beyond this life. I don't think that we die and disappear, right? And so,
right,
of course, in that further expansion is another expression of some other divine mind, probably, but and ad infinitum, right? So, and yet, Wow. Okay. You threw me off with that. I'm just going to say you did.
Then my
You did.
job is done here.
Yeah. We're done. This is the last show. Barb's baffled for a second. You can't talk. Well, I'm going to come back to healthy things grow, right?
Okay.
I mean, the simple thing is that healthy things grow. So we have that impetus to grow and to express good. I like to think that generally we have an impetus to express good, and that along the way, somewhere in some of our lives, things happen that mess with that psychology, and there is a period of our lives where we make a lot of mistakes, generally speaking, and all of that is part of the learning and growing and becoming a different. I wanted to say greater expression, but are we ever a greater expression if we really are this learning slash playing being? Then all the expressions are just expressions, right? One part's not greater than the other part. Like if I look at my 20s, I go, "Oh, that was not my greatest expression," right? But maybe
Mhm.
maybe it's all the same because it's all of the same pattern and all of the same unfolding that brings us to here.
Mhm.
And is this the greatest expression? Probably not. Is there a greatest expression? I don't know. Is there a greater
To me, it's like you're continuously ever moving towards it. It's not something we attain. It's an ever calling us forward. It's like a tractor beam in Star Trek. We're never getting to it, but it's calling it towards us. And there is an aspect of the greatest expression of who we can be that is continuously calling us to evolve, express ourselves, show our gifts and talents, be of service, etc.
Be kinder, be deeper, be more loving,
Right.
be more present, breathe more clearly, right?
And I think most of the mystics and people who have looked into this kind of thing from an inner standpoint have come to those kind of consistent findings, that there is sort of a general direction that spirit is bringing us or taking us as we evolve back into remembering the truth of where we came from. That we're sort of like on that hero's journey where we're wandering out in life so we can screw up and then learn from it and then return home and then know the home, at a better level than we did before. But that growth of ever, when we take to the highest, greatest expression, which is something we like to say, it's not a static level that we attain. It's an ever evolving level in my mind.
Yes. And again, though, when you say it like, that it's pulling us, it makes it sound like there's a separate being out there pulling our chain,
Mm-hmm.
or pulling us forward, or pulling us into something. And if we don't believe that there is a separate being,
Mm-hmm.
then the push and the pull lives within us in some way, and it's our work, part of our work, to find it.
Mm-hmm.
And to live into, Michael Beckwith talks about this envisioning, right? Find the thing that pulls you instead of
Mm-hmm.
the push that pushes you, or I like to say, the 2x4 that smacks you across the head to get you moving, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
to find the pull. And that's the thing that I think is all of ours to uncover in this evolving of life, is to uncover the thing that pulls you and allow it and nurture it, and but don't expect it to do it by itself either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we've been given free will, and we've been given free will for the ability to make wrong choices and to go about making choices. And again, wrong is a relative term from this human realm, but we're making choices that lead to our growth. So are they ultimately wrong? But they're choices that are maybe not of the best and highest. Again, we have the limits of our language. Like a moment ago when you were talking about my tractor beam example, that's just a product of the limitations of language in my mind, and trying to say, how can I take a relative perspective of humanness and shift it out of a sense of separation and use the very nature that we're doing a podcast and using language is breaking things into individual words and concepts and ideas. So it's always a breakdown of ideas to build it back into a pointing at mechanism. It's the finger pointing at the moon, but it's not the finger that's look at the moon. And so,
yeah, it's not in the Jewish faith tradition. They say to try to define God is to limit God.
Right. Right. And when we use terms like the tractor beam, or we can talk about the various kinds of love, the love that is within me that wants the divine has love that within it that is pulling me towards it. These are separate, they're separate concepts that point to an essence of us being separate from. But we have to acknowledge that part of being a spiritual being is going through the human experience where we are experiencing a degree of separation from the divine. It's the separation in our conscious, in our awareness. So, we can have those moments of bliss and meditation and where we have deep senses of oneness. And then we're back into, well, I understand it intellectually, but I'm not quite living it in this moment.
Yeah, all the noise.
Or as a teacher, you want to try to say, well, how do I get you to understand what I'm talking about? And sometimes it means using language that involves separation to point at unity. And it's just it's a nature of the beast kind of thing.
Yeah, but and when I was saying that, to find the pull and to be in the pull requires our cooperation and some movement. I was not necessarily talking about like denying the path or getting off the path, or it's more of the and we all do this. There's parts of our lives where we think we know what we want or how we want to express, but we want it to fall through the ceiling into our lap, rather than having to take steps towards it. And there's a lot of confusion in that around in affirmative prayer, I think, out in the New Thought world, even like because of movies like The Secret. Well, I put it on my vision board and then it just happened. And in between, I put it on my vision board and here's the house that just happened is normally a lot of work. And a lot of sometimes even efforting. I mean, I think that when we're in the stream and when we're in the stream of the purpose of our being, it becomes not so effortful. It feels joyful. You're still doing the thing. You might it's chop wood, carry water, right? Only you're chopping wood with more joy.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
It's like something we talked about in a previous episode of being, if you're in alignment with the divine pattern, that you get in the harmony and things start flowing better. So it's a sense of becoming aware of so when you become aware of your purpose and you become on course rather than wandering in the desert, you're on course. And all of a sudden things line up for you. And so I think one of the big learnings, if we're coming back to being, so let's say your life purpose is not only to exist for the bliss of the divine, but at the individual level of yourself. You're here to express your unique talents and abilities. You're here to do what it is you're called to do as a vast part of the multiplicity of the expression of the one. Barb is doing what she needs to do. All our listeners are doing what they need to do, or they're working towards it in some form or fashion. So we each have to find that path for ourselves. And I think that lining up of life to a degree of harmony is one of the way showers, one of the patterns that points us in the direction of what's ours to do and be. And I know back many years ago when I first became a minister, I liked to teach classes on, finding your purpose. And a lot of the classes got into the fact that we would go through the timeline of your life and look at what are those choice points in your life that you either made or didn't make that led you in a different direction or led you in a direction that resonated with you or didn't. What are those things that you did where you felt like you were in the flow? What would you do if you were, if nobody said you couldn't do it and you could do one thing? What would be the one thing? It was always those kinds of questions leading you into finding the alignment that's within you towards something that you know at the deepest essence of your soul that you're here to do and be. And it's trying to identify it and then take the steps in your life to move in that direction. And when you do, you become in harmony with that divine pattern, because there's sort of it's not a preconceived set one thing, but there's sort of a general area that you feel something that so resonates with you that you're called to do that's part of your purpose. And I think one of the key things that we do is when we talk about purpose in life is to find that and then to move our life to be in alignment with that. And when we do that, it opens us to love. It opens us to service. It opens up to that moments of flow where things just happen and we lose track of time and everything is just magical in its output.
I think it's interesting, however, I think for so many people I've worked with on these kinds of things, like something, they knew what it was when they were 10, they knew what made their heart beat faster when they were 10 or 8 or 12, right? But something in their path told them that they couldn't make a living at it, that they couldn't do it, that they weren't good enough at it, that they couldn't be good enough at it, whatever it was. And then and then people end up doing the thing that they're really the second best at. Like, I'm really, really good at, this is not me, just for the record. I'm really, really good at music. Like, I can tell you that we come into this life experience with different purposes because I, for one, have no musical talent. So, right. so it's clear, right? That we all have different things. But so let's say I'm a person that has great musical talent, but I also happen to be good at math. And so we become a math teacher instead of pursuing music because math is more practical or whatever. And so a lot of times finding this thing is really just about peeling back the layers of stuff where we told ourselves we couldn't, or we shouldn't, or somebody told us that we couldn't make enough money at it. And whatever those things are that got in our way. And there are so many different ways to do those things that don't have to be about making money, but that bring a level of satisfaction and joy and peace into our lives, right? So I want to encourage anybody that's listening who feels like they're stuck in whatever it is that they're stuck in and that it's not their thing, you too can move in this way. And I know that we need to move into our little commercial thing.
I was psychically willing.
You fiddling with the buttons, but I'm like walking up the clock. So it's a good time to move into that. But I want to say, and maybe we'll open up with a little bit more of that. But we can move into a life that fully reflects our consciousness and our purpose.
Yeah. And let's pick up on that topic. But first, this message.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
So Barb, well, first off, let's just reinforce the fact that we hope you're enjoying this, and please support the New Thought Media Network. Also, we love your comments. We love your likes, your subscribes, and all of that stuff. Wherever you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment, suggestions for future topics you'd like us to delve into. And we do read the comments and try to reply to them. So hopefully this is you're finding it beneficial. Anything you want to add to that, Barb?
No, I would love to hear what people would like us to tackle. Honestly, this is fun. Gives me some homework to do during the week.
Yeah, getting back into the topic we were talking about before the commercial was, about the fact that there are barriers that come up in life that seem to take us off course from our purpose. And I was sort of thinking about that in preparation in my mind, at least for this episode, is the fact that one of the things when I first came to Science of Mind and I think you and I have talked about this before, is that a lot of the early training or training when we were coming into the program was about manifesting things. And so there seemed to be an emphasis on that. There was a materialistic aspect of, there's a power that you can use to create things in your life. Yet when you really get into the philosophy, there is so much more deeper stuff. And the deeper stuff for me is the parts that get into feeding this idea about why does anything exist or why do we exist? And so when we get into these kinds of topics, it really lifts the philosophy up to resonate for me at a higher level about how it feeds who I am and my place in the universe, as opposed to just being about gaining things. But the reason I say that is that I look out at the world right now, and it seems like, that there's an arc where people evolve from traditional religions to a secular world with no religion and faith, to maybe coming back to spiritual but not religious. And this is the typical audience that finds new thought and finds that it resonates with them. Mm-hmm. And yet in the secular world, which is a big chunk of our society, the focus is on separation, things. The focus is on money. The focus is on attainment of power. And so when we come into this planet and we think about the fact that, well, I've got this unique talent and ability, but everybody says you can't make money doing that, you tend to use that as a barrier for getting away, because society out there tends to say, if you want to be successful, then you've got to do X, Y, and Z, which includes money, 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 power, power, power. And I think what we're experiencing right now on the planet, and this may be a rabbit hole we don't necessarily want to go down to today, but a lot of the problems we're having is a love of greed, a love of money, a love of gathering stuff, the overwhelming aspect of a small number of people accumulating power and money and taking the system for themselves so that they are out of whack, and then with income inequality being out of whack on our planet. And to that, I think that points at, I've got a greater point here, is that shows a lack of true meaning in people's lives. If their meaning is totally attached to accumulation of possessions and wealth, anybody who's gone down that path knows that money doesn't buy happiness. It can buy stuff which can give you the illusion of happiness, but it doesn't bring a sense of meaning and purpose to your life. Yes, you can do things in worldly existence that are in alignment with your purpose and make money at it, and sometimes good amount of money. But there's a tendency of a lot of people to well, I don't have any meaning. I'm going to find meaning in attaining things, and I think that's a very vacant avenue to go down.
So for one thing, I think this is a very U.S.-centric problem, honestly. I haven't spent a ton of time in Europe, but I've spent a little time in Europe over the last few years. And the attainment of stuff is not the thing there at all, at least in the countries I was hanging out in, particularly France. It's not about that. It's about community and the well-being of community and connection and conversation. And it's very secular, but there is meaning in connection. And I think that here we would call that spiritual, because we are lacking connection here in so many ways right now. But I also think that the foundations of all of that are cracking, and I think that's part of what's happening right now is that the greed and the upside downness of our money system, of how capitalism has worked or not worked, as the case may be, are cracking, and young people are seeking. And well, actually, in a show we did a week or two ago when we were talking about church attendance, I pulled up some statistics, and young people are not buying things. They are paying for experiences. They are more inclined to go hiking than they are to buying things, or they want to go, and have some sort of an experience of the world rather than buying things in the world. So there's a shift happening. It's slow. It's not probably mostly not in our generation, happening because we grew up in that system of go, 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 gain, 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 gain. And, underneath all of that, because of how our system works, there is a certain amount of you have to do some of that to pay rent or to buy a house or to um, pay for groceries. I mean, it's not like those things are free in any way, shape, or form. So unfortunately, we've done ourselves as a society, I think, a great disservice in that we don't have people of wealth who are patrons of the arts in the way that they used to be, or that
Yeah.
have the artists move in with them and paint,
Yeah.
as part of what they do with their money. But um, but I also think that healing. So if we go back to this question of why are we here, and why does the divine want to express in any or have these experiences, it's it seems to me that it's about healing and transformation,
Yeah.
right? So we start out in a place that needs something to heal in order to move into this greater connection. And because we don't by nature, we don't until we're older, I think. Or some, I don't want to box it that way. Actually, I take that back, because there are young people that have learned early on, like, I can go sit under a tree. I feel way better than I do when I'm grinding away someplace, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that gets to the natural tendency that, when we shift the consciousness of the planet, we often start at square one when we come on, born onto the planet. But we can go through the first three steps, which might have taken people 50, 60 years, many years ago. People now can do that in 10 years or 5 years. So there's a great attainment of knowledge and wisdom that is sort of delivered in a way to people who are now born based on the uplifting of the consciousness of the planet, the very nature that we are at a further level. They can go through those earlier steps much quicker, and which means that they can get it where we came into something later in life, they may get it much, much earlier. And I'm seeing evidence of that with, my grandkids and some of their friends as well.
right.
Yeah.
I think, we were born into a system here in the US that was so built out of slavery and Protestant belief, and, like, you can't sit, you have to work, you know all of this stuff that is still continues. I remember being told, you can't, if you're sitting down, you're not working. Like,
Yeah.
um and so I think that part of the secularization is to break away in some way from those traditions that had us working ourselves to death for a system that doesn't work for us.
Hmm.
And so there has to be some sort of a break. And so we move out of that heavy duty Protestantism, Christianity, whatever you want to call it, that created that. And we go through this period of time for a while where the world becomes more secular, in order to be able to step back and examine what was and learn from it in a truthful way and in an honest way, and then decide if I really am if I really do want to live my life differently. And maybe that's where a spiritual journey comes into it a little bit more, even if people don't recognize it as that. We would call
Hmm.
it that,
Yeah.
because it's a deeper examination then of what brings joy and what brings contentment, and what brings happiness to my clan and my family, or whatever it is, you know and what then steps do I take to heal this part of my past that was all in this, and heal my body and my mind and my spirit from that, so that I can move into some other expression of being. And that's what the transformation is. And we would call that a spiritual journey, and other people just might call that life,
Yeah. Yeah.
or honesty, or getting real, or they might not want to think of it as spiritual at all, because they still can't separate spiritual from what they learned growing up as a
Right.
Lutheran, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And what you outlined is sort of stuff we've covered in some prior weeks in terms of the work of Claire Graves, Don Beck, and others in spiral dynamics. But the various recognition, which has been seen by a number of people in recent years, that we move through a cycle of worldviews, that we learn lessons of one, it has its limitations, and then that creates world conditions that allow us to evolve into a next level. And we did go through a very religious period to a very secular period, which has led to an overabundance of materialistic looking at life, to a rebellion to the limitations of that view, which has led into the spiritual but not religious. And it has its own limitations as well. But we're birthing into newer and higher levels, which a lot of people call integral or advanced or second tier, whatever word you want to give to it. But it's a recognition that there's a movement. And one of the key markers at that higher level is the awareness of all the lower levels and how they served us. Because otherwise, we just think there's culture wars. We just think, right, you think this, I think this, we're at odds with one another. But when we get to the higher understanding, we see the pattern and the path and the value that it served us. The reason after the break I brought this up about the people and the income inequality and that kind of thing is that there is a real, and I'm not new to this phrase, people, I've seen it out there, and a lot of people on the internet refer to a crisis of meaning, that there is a lack of meaning in people's lives right now, and that much of what's going on in the world that we call it the challenge of life is the impetus of it is that somehow or another, out of that materialistic worldview of gather power and money and stuff, is a lack of meaning that comes out of people's lives, and they're looking for some meaning. That's when they return back to being spiritual but not religious. What they're trying to say is, hey, there is greater meaning to life, but it's not that old religion that we evolved through earlier. And now we're trying to find meaning at that level. And now understanding the whole path helps us guide us into looking forward to saying, okay, what's next? And how can I serve and play in that? And how can I bring meaning to it? Which I think you and I probably would say it's a matter of growth, evolution, and coming back to wholeness in who we are and our understanding of our interplay in the oneness of life. And?
Well, I think that's true. I also like that for, when you get off the train in England and they always say there's a voice that comes on that says, mind the gap, because the train doesn't quite line up with the platform anymore.
Right.
And I think that we're in a gap. Gaps are healthy, right?
Yeah.
But I think, that attainment of stuff and material wealth did give people meaning. It begins to feel hollow at some point for a lot of people. For some people, it still feels really joyful. But for a lot of people, that's become hollow. And so now we're in this gap of what is possible if we're not going to do this anymore as a society, if we're going to let go of this way of being, then what's possible in its place?
Right.
And over the gap then is the pull, and this happens in our life at various times in our lives. There's lots of times in our lives, right? If you look back, where you've probably experienced a gap where this thing that you thought was driving you or pulling you or whatever it was is no longer true. And then you're in this abyss of, I recently, we call it maybe we call it the dark night of the soul, but it is a gap. It's the hole or the abyss, right? I mean, I've just been through one, still coming out of the other side of it, right? And finding the platform again of when you get on the platform, then which direction do you want to go? This is different from the direction that you were going. And what is the life that you want to build from that? And I would say that is when we get into this place of like, okay, what is our true expression and what is your true meaning and what does bring me joy? And it reminds me, I used to tell our ministerial students, I used to teach ethics for the ministerial school. And I used to tell our students at the end, we make all these things really complicated and we add rules and structure and all this stuff. And really, and I used to say this was about ministry, but I think this is really about life. Love the people and do good things.
Right.
And it's kind of that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. And when you talk about the gap, it makes me think about the fact that as we're leaving one worldview and moving into another, or we're changing in our life and what's important and looking at new things that are important, that we to borrow a phrase from integral theory, they often refer to transcend the old, but include the good parts of the old, include those things. So materialism has been a beneficial thing to us. It's given us hot water showers and running toilets and electric lights and
all things I approve of.
yes, and so many more. And
this technology that allows us to sit here and talk to each other when from 60 miles away.
Right. But don't lock that as the end game. That now take the best parts of even religion. When we look back at it, where there were aspects of the religions of our youth which served us, and to take those things, those moral values and compasses about how to act correct in a world of other people, and bring those with you into the higher levels of your understanding. And I think as you do that, they serve as sort of, way markers for you to move to the higher levels of your being. And so when you're in that deep, dark night of the soul, it's often called the void too, where we're letting go of the old way and before the new is totally birthed. When we go through that cycle of newness at its peak and then the waning and then into the void, that we have to recognize that's a natural part of our human journey, is that we move through these dark nights of the soul or voids, that there are a time for us to assimilate the life experiences and to see what they've given us, so that we can also be open to the newness of life and what's being birthed for us. That's listening to those things that can bring us into alignment with what's ours to do and be on the planet. And that's listening to what's our purpose. So Barb, I see we're running sort of low on time. I'll let you respond to that, but maybe we can move towards some final thoughts on life and purpose.
Well, it's interesting because I got an email today. It was an invitation to join some gathering, right? But it's about AI, and it was talking and what, and they were, I think we're about to be, I read this email, and at first I was a little skeptical, and then I was like, actually, there's some truth in this. I think we're about to be accelerated in this, because AI is about to very quickly replace a lot of work. And we are going to need to find meaning in our life, in how we express and how we are in the world with each other and whatnot, that is outside of the norm of work as our meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about to accelerate greatly for young people. I mean, a lot of us over 50, we're already in that conversation. What do I want the rest of my life to look like? How do I do this thing? How do I want to retire? Or over 60, right? But I think for young people, it's about to become a bigger question as well. So,
which leads us to the point that when you and I were growing up, a lot of times it's what is, you looked at the meaning of life as a career choice. Mm-hmm. But what were you going to do? And they were going to do that all your life. But the older I've gotten and the wiser I've gotten, the more I've realized that those true callings, those true divine urges, they aren't specific to a career. They're a talent or an ability. It can be communication. It can be interpersonal skills. It can be working with detail work, but it's not a specific area. It's a generalized way of being in the world. And if you shift your thinking of, my purpose is not to be X job, but to express this talent in the world, that gives you the flexibility to say, how can I bring this talent, this ability, this gift I've got, this calling in me to express in a new world where there's new things needed? There's always going to be something needed. There's always going to be a next level of human need that is being birthed by the process of technology and life conditions changing. And so it'll
just look different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to look like I get up every day and I go to work and I work and then I come home and I have dinner and I watch TV and I go to bed. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I kind of hope that for the next generations coming up, that it doesn't look like that, right?
Yeah. And going back to the very beginning thing, that we exist for the bliss of spirit, and spirit wants to exist and experience through us in the most infinite variety of ways. Would it not want to have an individual lifetime being giving its gifts in an infinite variety of ways? Or would it want that lifetime? Lifetimes have already experienced one career, one job, one organization.
Oh yeah, we're way past that.
We're way past that. And now spirit might want something different. Spirit wanting being a human. Again, limitation on spirit, which isn't true.
Right. There's no way around it. There's no way around it.
All right.
Okay, so we do need to wrap. Final thoughts on this?
Just, I would encourage anybody who's listening to the very end. First off, thank you for this. Thank you for staying to the end. Secondly, I hope you got something out of it. Hopefully you see the big picture. This has helped put something in perspective for you. And it's also taken it down to the individual level of you looking at your life and saying, how can I be in alignment with what's this inner pull that's within me? And how can I express it in this life and be of service to others?
Yes. And if you're looking for support around that, put a note in one of the chats. We can refer you to folks who are really good at helping to uncover and reveal that which really brings you joy, and maybe what blocks you've put up in front of it. So thank you, Mark. This has been lots to think about, as always, which I really appreciate. I hope it's been that way for all of you who are listening. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen and contemplate and be with us in this conversation. So drop us a note and tell us what you want us to talk about next.
Take care. Bye-bye.